Welcome to the RFP Success Show with host Lisa Rehurik, the #1 sought-after authority on RFP success. Each week, we bring you information, strategies, or resources to help you win more business through RFPs and have a little fun doing it. Let's get this week's episode started.
Welcome, everybody. You are listening to the RFP Success Show. I am your host, Lisa Rehurik, founder of the RFP Success Company. So last week, we talked about the type of positions that you should have on your proposal team, particularly if you're a small business without the luxury of having this fully dedicated proposal team. And as you grow, you may want to hire more support in that area. And then also for those of you who already do have a dedicated proposal team, you know that hiring can be a challenge. So we talked about all these different roles last week. This week, I'm really excited to bring Devon Underwood in as our guest because Devon is a talent attraction, acquisition, and retention strategist. And she's here to talk to us about how to hire, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about retain your key talent. So Devon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a universal topic, and I feel like what you do and what I do are so similar because whenever I tell somebody I help with RFPs, they're like, oh my God, I need so much help in that area. And I feel like it's the same with hiring because nobody ever feels like they do it right. Do you get that a lot?
Absolutely. I think it's the one thing that people don't ever feel totally secure in or feel it's such a big challenge or amount of work that they just don't have the capacity to dedicate the time and energy sometimes.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm just getting ready to do that myself, hiring my first 2 employees ever. So, well, let's kick this off.
Exciting.
I know it is. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, let's kick it off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your company does, and maybe a little bit about your background.
Sure. Yeah, I've been in executive search and talent acquisition for almost 15 years now.
Wow.
Really started in third-party executive search and recruiting, and then joined a couple companies that were growing really aggressively. So companies that had been kind of small, mid, did hiring or recruiting a certain way that worked enough, right? And then they were just exploding, and we needed to find a way to scale a talent strategy that kept up with their strategic growth. And so that gave me, between those 2 areas, a lot of tools in my tool belt, a lot of interaction with how recruiting is done internally and externally, and some of the broken pieces that are still out there. You know, it's been done very much the same for, 20 plus years. And I think that there's opportunity to shift and innovate a little bit. And so I founded the Talent Store, going out totally on my own full time about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years, actually, because this year's going really fast.
It is. Oh my gosh.
I'm like, it's October. Never mind. It's almost 2 years. But yeah, so it's been really to address a few things. One, how do companies that are growing, small, mid companies particularly, how do they hire those key positions well?
Yeah.
And what key positions do they even need?
Yeah.
How do they talk about who that person is and why they need them? And then where do they go to find them, right? And so I can partner on key position searching. Then we do, let's say a company's really focusing on, they're producing their product or their service, business development. Why should they have to build a recruiting team as one of their first things? So if they don't want to, we can help them build that infrastructure, or they can just use us as their recruiting team. And so we can be very partnered. And then talent strategy consulting, where if they want to build a scalable recruiting structure, we'll help them do that. Software, processes, systems, and who they need on their team. So there's different ways to look at it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's so much. Again, I kind of said this a couple minutes ago. I'm getting ready to hire my first 2 new employees, and you and I have talked a little bit about that. But there's just so much to know and do in the hiring process in general. And it is a lot of work to recruit and find. I mean, it's really easy to say, oh my gosh, I'm just going to go out and post stuff out to Indeed or wherever is the hot job posting board these days. Mm-hmm. But there's so much more to it than that. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when it comes to hiring?
Not being strategic. And I think there's a couple pieces or times in that puzzle or in that process where it really has an impact. So stopping to think, like what you laid out, who do you need on your RFP team
Yeah.
and why? And that who is not just what skill set. Do you need experience and skill sets that are specific? You need some success factors and success attributes that you're going to be digging out about the person, right? Do they need to work autonomously, or is it more task-oriented? Can you give them a list? Do they have to be resourceful? So what are the differentiators that would really make someone successful in the role you need? And then spinning that to, how do I advertise to attract that someone in a more strategic way and kind of give myself some first filters? And then how do I interview? How do I vet this person?
Yeah.
To even see if those skill sets and the success attributes are there. And taking, 20, 30 minutes before the interview to prepare. So many people complain about the fear of hiring, the difficulty in interviewing, the mistrust of, do you really ever get to know this person? But they don't even take the time to set themselves up and prepare. And so then they throw themselves in the interview and wing it, and they walk out going, I don't know what we just talked about.
Yeah, or I forgot to ask all of these different questions.
Yeah.
I've just, we were just chit-chatting. So I'm notorious for that because I just like to talk to people and get to know them. So I'm notorious for just chit-chatting. And then the interview time goes by and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't really ask them all the questions that I wanted to ask because I'm just chit-chatting, and that's never good. So don't do that, people. Don't do that.
That's right. Yeah, it's a balance because, the culture of working with you would be fairly relaxed, right? You need someone who you're going to chit-chat with. You want someone who's warm. So that part of the interview is still very important. You don't want it to be robotic and question only, but give yourself those 5 core questions after reflecting on their resume so that you really have to make sure that those are prioritized in your conversation.
So when you're wading through these resumes, and this is, I always give my guests some questions up front, and this is a wing it question here, Devon. So when you're wading through, how can you tell what is good and what is bad of resumes when you've got a stack of 200 on your desk that you're trying to wade through?
That's right. It can be difficult. So prioritize yourself by industry matches, industry or company type matches. So if the companies listed there are similar in size or values or mission or focus in some way, those should stand out to you. And get to know the lay of your market and what those companies would be. Size could be one of those. So if it's a very large company, let's say an Abbott lab, and I'm representing a small medical device consulting firm where someone's going to need to be part of the whole process and not siloed like they would be in a large company. I know that size match is going to be important, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in other places, maybe not. So looking at that, looking at their tenure in positions, looking at the depth in the title that they've taken on. Not every career is a straight ladder. So it's not always a promotion, but kind of look at, does it feel like they had an idea? Did they have a map? Did they have a plan? Does it seem like their career is on, even if a lateral trajectory, but some sort of sensical path, right?
Yep.
If they're all over the place, maybe they don't know who they are. If they're all over the place, maybe you ask, what did you learn from being in all those roles? And now, who do you really want to be going forward? But at least you're taking note of these different things so you're preparing yourself for the interview.
I love that. And, you said something a little while ago about, success. I can't remember exactly what you said when you're doing the role description to kind of map out. I read a book a while ago called The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. Are you familiar by chance?
I've heard of it. I've not dug into that book, though. Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's specific to sales, but I'm curious what you think about this. And his whole approach to hiring a salesperson was to kind of scare the crap out of them in the role description because he wanted only people that were really serious about this particular role. So he's like, be detailed and kind of scare them. Don't scare them, but you want to put as much in there and be as upfront and honest. How do you feel about that tactic?
I agree. I think that, not scare them. So depending, right? If you're in a position, he's well thought of, he's well known, he's well respected. Getting some hard, heavy filters in your ad doesn't hurt you. It's a time saver, right?
Yeah.
And so he's already got a brand.
Yep.
So he may not need to be as open in his attraction techniques. If you're in a really tight market and you really have some play on the experience, but it's more of a soft skill or a culture fit you need, you might want to be a little more open on the experience ask and a little heavier on the who are they ask, right? How do they work? How do they think? What are those success attributes? So it just really depends.
Interesting. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Okay, so this we've kind of touched on this. I'm going to ask this question, and it's a big, huge, loaded question. So I'll let you break this down as best as you want. But what do business owners, so I'm thinking more of kind of the smaller business at this point, what do business owners need to know to make sure that they hire right?
Know what they need. So start with the job description and really your organizational map. Where are you now with the position? Where will this position potentially grow, or where would you want the right person to grow with this position? So you can kind of know not just who am I looking for now, but who am I looking for in terms of their interest in their own development, or where this position may grow, alignment in that way. And then start looking at your market, know your market, or have a partner, a recruiting partner that can do that for you. So you want to make sure when you have a recruiting partner, they're talking to you about what compensation is in your area, in that level of role. They're telling you what your competitors are doing. They have an insight that's going to help you be competitive or understand better where you need to look and go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love, that's really great insight. And I love the future alignment, right? Because we tend to not think about that. We're like, this is what I need right now. Oh my gosh. And let's just go kind of reactively go after it versus more proactively thinking, what's the future of this? And I think about this for me in particular, because they're going to be my first 2 employees, and that both positions are probably going to change pretty rapidly. So you got to have somebody that can change with that. So I love the future alignment. Good point.
Yeah. And that's a little carrot that you can hang as you're making a match, as you're bringing somebody in. It gives them an idea of a path, which gives you a competitive edge with the right talent.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. So what's the best place to find good talent, or the best way to find good talent and weed through all of the crap, for lack of a better word?
It depends on the industry and the need and the role. But so let's say you have a customer service company that you're going to now scale. So you're starting to open multiple locations, and you've got those sort of repeatable hires, those hires that you're going to need a lot of, that are going to be the frontline people with your customer. And every time I walk into a company like that, I immediately want to start an employee referral program, because then you're getting people who are, you take your best employees, right? And you say, I want to repeat them anyway. So they're going to reach out to their friends. They're also going to be able to tell people in a more realistic way what the job's about. So there'll be less misunderstanding or unknowns about the job. So I love an employee referral program for that type of role. If you're going on, let's say, an executive level or bioscience, LinkedIn, very specific associations. If you need certifications, CPAs, go to licensure lists and start just networking from them. Go to the associations associated with those professionals and where they get their CEUs. Post on those job boards. Any kind of great membership groups that you know about. So like here in Tucson Young Professionals, really know to have a group of 21 to 45-year-olds who are generally ambitious and community involved. And so if that's in line with what you need, start looking at different places like that too.
See, this is why you're the expert and why people need people like you, because what I think and what most probably business owners think, or even large companies, is like, slap this puppy up on Indeed and wait for the resumes to come in. But there is a whole better and deeper strategy to it than just that, it sounds like, obviously.
There is, yeah. And when it's a talent type market, most people in some jobs aren't actively looking. They're happy and they're well paid.
Yeah.
Especially if there's only a few of them. So you've got to get a little more creative. But even in like I said, the customer service roles, there could be hundreds of applicants for that type of role.
Right.
Why not start with people you already sort of know and who already sort of know the job?
Well, and two, I feel like if they're going to refer people, if they're good employees, they're probably hanging out with people that have some of the same work ethic that they do. And I love the referral program. I wish I had employees to do that with right now.
And when you're just starting, that doesn't help you, right?
Right. Well, it's interesting.
Use someone you really trust to be a matchmaker for you too, especially for those foundational key first employees. If you have somebody that's a recruiting partner that knows you, that gets you, that sees where you're going and can speak on your behalf in the marketplace, it's really powerful.
Yeah.
It can be a scary see at first when you first see it, but when you start to see how much easier your life is and how much the retention shifts and how your employment brand is being showcased by somebody you really trust like that, it can help.
That's so great. That's so great. I love it. And I am all about getting help and staying in my lane and doing what I do well and getting other people to do the piece that, because it is, I actually recruited maybe 4 months ago for but for a contract position. It wasn't a full-time hire. And I hadn't done that really since I started my own business. And I was like, I forgot how much work this is. And I don't have time to do this, so even for contract work, it's a lot of work. And that's not even a full-time employee. So absolutely. Now, so you just hit on this. I want to ask you this question. How do you hire in this type of an economy when, it seems like an employee market, not an employer market?
Yeah. And I think that being creative about where you're looking for people and where you're networking and talking to people. So we kind of already talked about that.
Yeah.
Like you said, with the ultimate sales machine, putting out there who you are and who you need. Be straight. I love to, all of those soft culture, mission, vision, touch points that really reflect who you are. That's the key, because if they don't, you're not helping yourself. Yep. But if it really reflects who you are, hang them out there and attract like. Because life does attract like. And so, put that out there. You may not be able to compete on compensation, but are there perks? Is there flexibility? Is there autonomy? Is there a mission value touch point that you really stand out on? That always should be front and center as an attraction piece.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, it's interesting. And then, and we kind of touched on this in the beginning, but I want to go a little bit deeper here. How do you make sure somebody is the right fit? And I also kind of want to toss in another question here around, because I'm notorious for this, and I know a lot of people are, is especially if you're a small business, is that you have like 18 different roles that you need this one person to play. And I always hear like, do not hire jack of all trades or you're going to get screwed. So can we talk about right fit, and then how many different kind of roles can we have one person do?
Right. So always really think about what are your key 3 things. So let's say I kind of always pose to my clients, what is the 90-day? Let's say this person is a success because they got this done in 90 days, this done in 180, and this done in the first year. What would those milestones be? And then walk those key milestones for your company into the job priorities. So in order to accomplish these milestones, these are kind of the core jobs they need to focus on.
Okay.
And that'll help you better flesh out what are the core jobs. Now, there's miscellaneous stuff we're all going to have to catch, right?
Right.
So then when you're interviewing, if you also find somebody who's just a great copywriter too, not going to be part of their core job, but are there other things they'd be interested in that they would still have a little bit of time to help you on as well?
Yes.
And you can always shift those a little bit depending on the person, but really still stay honed in and targeted on those core pieces that you determined are needed to hit your milestone.
I love that. That's really great because, again, sometimes we can have like 80 million little things, but really focusing on those core pieces is big. Okay. And then how do we find somebody that's the right fit? And this kind of goes in with another question of, there are really good interviewers out there. As a matter of fact, I just went through one who accepted the position and then reneged. because she got a better offer like 2 days later. So how can you flesh out that, like, the bullshit with the reality?
Well, if we could all be psychic, our life would be so much better.
Exactly.
So even as a trained professional, I get fooled sometimes by people, right? It happens. But there's ways, like you set up your questions. You've got personality assessments and testing, depending on the role and depending on what you're trying to understand about the person. This can be really valuable and helpful. They have some truth or at least consistency meters built into them as part of the science too, which is nice. Ask for validation. So if I hear, and I just had this the other day, resume looked incredible. The first conversation we had was really dynamic. Of course, he was applying for a business development role, right? You better have dynamic conversations.
Right.
Step one. But then, as I started to kind of say, oh, well, tell me more about this project. What did that go? What was the timeline? What did that look like? He couldn't dig into the details. And I started to also see how he responded in an interview process and understanding he was probably much more green in his career than he made himself out to be, because you could just feel, which wasn't a negative, but there was some bluster there that I started to kind of get a gut check on. And so my question at the end of the interview was, can you send me the references from the last 2 clients you consulted with? I'd love to talk to them about these projects. And he is still yet to send me those, right? The names and phone numbers. And so that's a little flag. If you've really done that and you're excited about it, I'd send that over to you in a minute, because I want you to hear of all the great things I did. So lack of detail or specific, and really using kind of these big brush descriptions of what you do. How much were you really involved in that project if you don't know the details, right?
Yeah.
And then following up with those follow-up references or next step questions.
That's really good. I like that more specificity, because I've also heard, I don't even know what the statistic is, but I heard an alarming statistic that a really high percentage of people lie on their resume.
Yes, I would say that that's probably true. And then they also do, lie when they're, I hate saying lie, but I mean, let's be real.
Fudge,
That's
right.
part of what it is.
Right.
I mean, they're
Call a spade a spade.
presenting, for better or worse, their intention may not be to deceive you. It may be to just, they're insecure and they want to get the job, or they don't really know who they are or what they want. And so they're going to say, yes, I love this, when they don't, right? Just to get the job. There's a lot of that going on out there, and you just kind of have to know just how to dig into that next step question. So having somebody that can help you say, okay, this is what you want to get to know about them, ask this question, and then here's a couple follow-up bullet points to arm yourself with.
Okay.
So you can see if they dig in a little more specifically. Also, on your example, always we're closing as a professional recruiter when I'm representing a client. One, I'm a third party, and all of a sudden they tell me things that you wouldn't believe, right? And so I started to dig in, and what does that mean? And I can have conversations that are just a little more preparatory. So let's say it's a relocation situation. I can kind of dig in and say, what is your timeline really, though? Let's say this interview process is 4 weeks, and then would you be able to get here in 30 days? What would get in the way? Are you sure you don't have a vacation plan? What else logistically would be the problem? What other companies are you looking at? What kind of offers are those? After the first interview, I go back and say, now, scale of 1 to 5, is this, what is this one? It's a 4, what would make it a 5? That other one you told me you were looking at, is that a 5? How's that going?
Love that line of questioning,
We're constantly kind of taking that temperature for you and doing the best we can to know where someone is. And it doesn't have to mean that they don't get to go through the interview process. Oftentimes with a client, I'll say, I have one right now. She's incredible. She'd be incredible for this community. She's not totally sold on moving to Tucson. But the company fit and the style of the community she would represent is huge. And so I know on that scale of 1 to 5, she's a 2 on Tucson. And so my client knows that.
Yeah.
So my client can be able to sell the town a little more or ask different questions around that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. That's such good insight. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I was I'm going to ask you this still. Give me like one or two of your top interview questions. I know you just gave us a whole bunch, but what are some
Yeah.
interview questions that maybe you asked that you're willing to share that are not mainstream?
And this is a little bit of my secret sauce, but I'll give it away. I always end an interview or around the near of the interview is I want to know what are the top 3 things that'll get them to say yes to their next position.
Oh,
When
I
they're
love
looking
that.
for this next role, what are the top 3 things that are on their checklist for it to be a fit? And people will talk about compensation. They'll talk about culture fit. They'll talk about work-life balance. They'll talk about, my fiance's in Phoenix and I want to be in Phoenix. What are the checklists there? And so you get a lot of insight into them. You also get to address then what's in alignment or what's not.
Right.
So, you mentioned that you need to be at 120 for this role. Probably it's going to start at, and I don't create the compensation budget,
Right.
but the top of my client's range might be like 110. If everything else makes sense, do you have flexibility there or not? Because I don't want to waste your time, right? And
Right,
so then
right.
we can talk about those misalignments. I really love work-life balance. Well, this is a startup, and this is the first business development person. There probably won't be a lot of balance there. But as they grow the team and they have the processes and systems set up in their business development world, maybe there will be. Would you be able to jump in and get it going now, knowing there's light at the end of that tunnel, or you want me to revisit you when this is a different position?
Huh.
So we can kind of talk about those sorts of things too. So you find out what's important to them, but you find out where there might be some misalignment. So you can open up just some transparent discussions about the job.
That's really good. And I feel like you can, as the recruiter, ask. I think for me, as if I were a candidate talking to a recruiter, I'd be much more open than I would be if I was talking to the employer. So I think
Right.
that's another huge benefit to using somebody like you.
It is. Yeah, I think so. And, even most of my clients, the favorite thing that I do for them is just handle the compensation discussion so that they can fall in love with each other and not have that as part of the story. I'm saving both everybody's time on the background. I think that alone is a huge benefit. But having someone represent you and make a match on your behalf, even for me, I am not great at talking about me.
Right.
And what I'm going to offer, what I'm going to be able to do, and I'm actually not really great at listening on my own behalf. I'll end up smiling and wanting to make someone feel comfortable.
Yep.
And kind of doing the chit chat. Whereas if I'm representing somebody else, I'm a lot more diligent about, wait, what was that? And asking that next question. So it helps to have somebody out there who's kind of taking care of some of those nuts and bolts for you.
I love that. Yeah, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree. I have another kind of random question for you here, and maybe a loaded question, but when we're talking about, say, a proposal manager position, right? You write the job description for proposal manager, and then every time you recruit, you use the same job description. Is that a wise thing? Or, because if I look at like a large proposal team, I don't want all of the same person. I don't want 6 of the exact same person on there, even though the role might be the same. How do you deal with that when you want to kind of mix it up and get different types of people, but it's the same role? Do you change the role description, or does that just come in the interviewing?
I think it comes in the job ad and the interviewing.
Okay.
So the job description, I look at the job description as an HR document. It really needs to be about core competencies, job duties. You use it to frame your ad. You use it to frame who you're looking for and who you need and to map your organization. But you also need to use it for EEOC compliance, for evaluation, so that they're fair and consistent and based on what you said the core duties of the job are. So that's sort of your guiding map. And that's why you see a lot of them that say, all other duties as needed.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because then there's some administrative stuff. But when you're building your team, you might have somebody that's great at the administrative stuff and someone else that is like your creative event person on the side, right? Or they do the team building and this person does the admin and this, but they're all functioning in the same role, maybe, right?
Yep.
So that's where you're fitting your team together differently. You could put some stuff in the ad that's heavier on the admin if you're missing that piece in your team. You could, in an interview, ask more questions around some of those pieces of the duty.
Yep.
Just depending on how you're going to fit everybody together.
So it kind of goes back to that strategy, and we shouldn't just assume that just because, we're filling another proposal manager role, that we just pull that paperwork out and go for it. There should be strategy for each and every position, even if it's the same position. Sounds
right.
like.
Yeah, just think about who your team is and who else you need. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Love it. Well, Devon, this has been so great. Tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you, because you work with companies all over the nation, right? Like, you're not just Tucson.
That's right. I work with companies all over the country. I'm really, my core of my business is in Arizona, so Tucson and Phoenix.
Okay.
But I've got companies in Boston, Kentucky. We're able to help. My goal is really mostly small, mid companies. I do help some large companies in different capacities, but really to help those companies that are growing and don't have the typical resources that a large company would.
Yeah.
We've changed the service model. We've reduced pricing in a new way. We've partnered differently. And for me and my clients, it's really about how do we know them deeply so they don't have to tell their story because one's an accounting recruiter, someone else is a finance recruiter, someone else is an RFP recruiter. We recruit for you, and we can then fill in the roles as needed, right?
Yep.
So that's important. People can visit my website, yourtalentstore.com.
Love it.
And I'm on LinkedIn like crazy all the time. And then we've got, Facebook, we've got Instagram, and I'm a huge part of, particularly in Tucson, the Chamber and Tucson Young Professionals. So I'm out and about a lot.
A lot. Okay, perfect. Well, all that information will be in the show notes for the listeners. So if you missed it, don't worry. You can check that out in the show notes. Devon, any last thoughts, parting thoughts before we conclude?
I think that if you really start to think, if you take just a little bit of extra time to put together who do you need, why do you need it, where are you growing, where are you going, and then have the interview reflective of who you are as an organization, and think about how does your onboarding reflect that, and then what is that 90-day plan? What is the 90-day milestone? The worst thing to do is hire somebody and then go, am I going to keep them longer than I should because I didn't really know what the success factors were? I didn't set them up correctly, right?
Yep.
Or am I just not even going to know because I haven't set them up? So really, at least that first 90 days, have some sort of map of what you're going to be able to say, pat yourself and then on the back and say, we really did it. This was great hire. And this is going to continue to grow. So, I always look at it from that attraction to that 90 days. How do we make sure that that's a success? Then you can build on it.
Love it. Great, great advice. Devon, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here, and you've given us some really great information. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, you've been listening to the RFP Success Show. As always, if you would please go subscribe, make sure that you give us ratings. We love you all for doing that, and we will see you again here next week.
You have been listening to the RFP Success Show with RFP expert Lisa Reherik, author of the RFP Success Book. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, make sure you click the subscribe button so you don't miss a show. And thanks for spending time with us today.